Okay, we're checking the mic. There's nothing on the mic. We're checking the mic. There's nothing on the mic yet. Nothing on the mic yet. Nothing on the mic. We're checking the mic. Sooner or later, you guys are going to be blasted by my voice any minute. Hello. If anyone's on live and can see this, be patient. We'll get there. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 3, 4, 5. Testes 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, testing. We're going to get started here just as soon as we get our Mercury retrograde stuff dealt with. Testing. We have no microphone. Testing, 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 testing. Testes 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6. Prime numbers 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 17, 23, 23, 31. That's as far as I go. Huh? All right, and if, oh, wait, was that it? No, that was just my loud voice.
Sounds like it's barely coming through.
Testing, there's nothing coming. No, that's my voice coming through. There's nothing coming through here. This is plugged into number 5, if that means anything here, Makia. Testing, testing, nothing, testing, nothing, testing, nothing, testing, nothing. Everybody online, be patient. Can you hear me online? Is anyone online? Can you hear me online?
Check that in a moment. Just seeing if maybe
Am I unplugging this?
That seems better.
Testing, still nothing. Is there an on switch on the microphone?
It's on 6 now.
Testing. Oh. Woo.
Voice of God.
Hello.
That's your real voice.
Hello. I like that. Do we have a reverb? We don't have it. Hello. 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 We're still working on it. We're still working on it. Hello. Hello, hello. Hello. So hello for you who are online. Hello, Lynn. Hello, Dusty. Oh my God, there's a pile of you there already. Hi, Makia. Hello. Testing. Testing, testing. We're getting close. Testing. Oh, woo. I think we have liftoff. I think we are ready. All right, I'm supposed to be talking into the microphone, and I think I will largely hold this in my, oh, that's way too loud. Too loud, too loud, too loud, too loud, too loud, 3 loud, 4 loud, 5 loud. Hello. No, it's still too loud because my voice is going to go up when we talk. All right. All right. Can you guys hear me now? Is this good? All right. And we're still working out a couple of things. Thank you for all of you who are online. We astrologers should know better than to do anything like this when Mercury is retrograde. But the problem, of course, is that Mercury is retrograde for, about 2.25 months a year. And so that means don't do anything for that period of time. That's crazy. We'll talk about that. Sam, is there anything I need to know? Are we on? Are we good?
I'm just checking the stream now, but good.
I should keep talking, Sam says. Sam's my boss for the evening. And Sam, once you get situated there, if we can get a pan of the room, we got like a really good turnout tonight. And it's nice to see all your happy and smiling faces. Hopefully you'll be this happy and smiling by the time you're gone. We'll see. See if I can ruin your lives in a short amount of time. I'm still killing time waiting for Sam to tell me that everything is cool. What are we working on? What are we doing?
The Wi-Fi is being sassy.
The Wi-Fi is being sassy. Okay. All right. So if I'm looking at YouTube, I'm not seeing. Oh.
Did you hit go live? Did you actually hit launch live on this?
Well, people are coming up on the page saying that they're seeing us, or that they're. Can you guys online see anything, or are you just hearing? You're saying Willow says you're good, Rick. Hi, Willow. But what are you seeing on your screen? Are you seeing anything, or just a static picture of me? Someone online help us. Hello, people online. Daryl, Bert, Kay, Deborah, Laura, Lego lover. I thought it said leg lover. All right, hold on. We're still working on it. Yeah, so apparently they see both Rick. What does that mean? Both Rick. Are there 2 of me? I don't get it.
Both the sound and the picture.
Oh, both the sound and the picture. So I'm still not sure why I'm not seeing it here.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it on my thing either.
It says 191 watching now, started streaming 7 minutes ago. And I don't get it. What happens if I hit? Oh, if I hit play. I didn't hit. I got to stop it now. All right, we're good. I got to turn the volume off there because I can't hear you. That'll make it rather confusing. Although it looks like it's, no, that's weird. It looks like it's delayed. Like,
yeah, there's like a 15-second delay on this always.
No, it's way more than 50.
Hit the live button. Hit the live button at the bottom.
Live button at the bottom. No. Okay, now it's 15 seconds. All right. Welcome to Mercury Retrograde. Welcome to eclipse season. And this is the formal introduction. And I assume that I don't need to say this, but I do. It's part of my job. This is Rick Levine, and we are here live on Astrology Night, the first Friday night of every month here at SoulFood Coffeehouse in scenic Redmond, Washington, the bicycle capital of the world, I'm told. I don't know where that came from, but that's what the signs say when you drive into Redmond. And we're here to talk about some astrology, and I probably should get this over with at the beginning because I know that many of you know that it is my birthday. Technically, my birthday is tomorrow. However, technically, our calendar, what's the technical word for that? Sucks. Our calendar is off, which is why the first day of spring, dead. Let's get a pan of the groups in. My camera won't go all the way around, huh?
The cables will.
Well, so flip it around from the other side too, so that we get a, so no one feels left out. And oh my gosh, I got it. I got it. And all right, and I'm going to get rid of that screen 15-second delay. That's confusing as hell to me. And is this where I blow out the wish and blow out the wish and make a candle? Gonna be a good night. Okay, so we know that people all over the world with all their children basically perform a pagan ritual every year on their kids' birthdays, because the idea of lighting a candle in any ritual is something that you do to focus your attention. And then, as we all know, as educated witches and wizards, we know that as long as you're holding on to your wish, nothing can ever happen, that you have to let it go. This is Zen in the art of archery. The arrow can't hit the target until you let it go. And so what happens is at the end of any ritual or ceremony, you blow out the candle to release the energy of the circle. Wait, I got to make my wish. And there it goes. Thank you. And let me get this off the screen because this is confusing as hell seeing me at 15 seconds in the past. And that I think is a little bit truer to form. So, so back to the inaccuracy of the calendar, because this is where I want to start just for a quick moment. And, you know, the first day of spring, for example, that's what defines 0 degrees of Aries. Every year is the vernal equinox, the spring equinox in the Northern Hemisphere. But it's not on the same calendar day every year. It's always on the 18th or 19th or 20th, and it moves back and forth because our calendar is a Roman calendar based upon the sun. There are many calendars that are lunar calendars: the Arabic calendar, the Hindu calendar, the Hebrew calendar, the Chinese calendars are all lunar calendars. And the sun and the moon's rhythms are slightly off. There aren't an exact number of lunar cycles in one solar cycle. There's like between 12 and 13, closer to 13 lunar cycles, or a one lunar cycle is one moon or one, catch this, moonth. And that's why we have 12 moonths a year, because we chop off the extras and turn it into a solar cycle. Now, the only reason I'm saying this, well, I'm really saying this for 2 different reasons. The first reason is that when we celebrate our birthday every year, we're celebrating it on the solar calendar. But the actual birth moment is the moment when, from Earth's point of view, the Earth has made one complete cycle around the sun. And if you were able to draw a straight line from the Earth to the sun and keep going and going and going and then going some more and then some more, you'd come up to that area of sky that we call today Aries, or about 16 degrees into the 30-degree segment of Aries. That's what our birthday is. It's a sun returning from Earth's point of view to where it was when we were born. We astrologers try not to use the word birthday. Do you have any idea how many birthdays the average person in the United States has? 1. Period. So this really isn't my birthday. It's a celebration of an annual return of my birthday. But it's not what astrologers would call your solar return. It's the place when, it's the moment when the sun returns to where it was when you were born. So my point in all of this is that although my birthday was April 6, 1949, God, it's too far back in time, the sun actually returned to where it was
at that time on April 6, 1949 at 8:35 in the morning in Bronx, New York, at that moment, the sun was at a particular position. And the sun was at that exact position this morning at about 10:30. So today is technically, even though it's really the day before my calendar birthday, it's technically my, what astrologers call my solar return. Now, part of the reason why I'm mentioning this is that many of you who do follow astrology online may have heard that the United States is going through its Pluto return. Some people know that with hands. Okay, about half of you. So we celebrate our birthday, which is our solar return. Those people who are into astrology also pretty much know about their Saturn return, which is really your first Saturn birthday. That's when Saturn returns in the sky to where it was when you were born. And that occurs, give or take, around 29 and a half. And because of the Earth moving inside of the orbit of Saturn, all the real planets look like they go backwards. They don't really, and we'll get to that in a moment because that's the Mercury retrograde that we're already into now. But Saturn also turns retrograde, which means that your Saturn return can actually begin on one day when it's exact to where it was when you were born. But because Saturn moves so slowly, it can be 9 months later when Saturn is moving through that same point on the last swing forward. So your Saturn return can last 9 months. But Saturn is the planet of responsibility, of maturity, of rules, of growing up. And whether you know astrology or not, we can all look back at about our 29th year. But if we think of ourselves at 27 and 28, and then we think of ourselves at 30 and 31, usually it's quite different. Usually we've done something that adults call growing up. We buy homes, sell homes, change jobs, change careers, go back to school, have kids, move cities, commit a crime and go to jail forever. I mean, whatever. But we do things that have long-lasting import because Saturn is about structure and about reality and about and about stability and maturity. We all, if you live into your 30s, we all experience our Saturn birthday at age about 29 and a half. And we experience our second Saturn birthday roughly at around age 57, 58, depends, give or take a little bit, again, because of the movement of the Earth. And again, often we look back and we think, what have I done in my life so far, whether you're 27, 28, 29, or whether you're in your mid-50s, you begin to think, where have I been? What have I done? What's worked? What hasn't worked? What do I want to do? How am I going to get to where I'm going? And we often make those changes. And there are many people whose lives are so out of whack, think so many rock and roll stars, that they don't make it through their Saturn return. They call that the 27 Club or the 28 Club. But all those people who died around that period of time, it's because Saturn is a planet of you get what you deserve. But my point here is that we all have a birthday or a solar return every year. Okay. We all have a Saturn return roughly every 29, 30 years. We all each would have a Pluto return every 248 years, except we don't live that long. And Pluto is the planet of deconstruction, reconstruction. Some people say it's the planet of death. Well, death does not come as an isolated event. Death and rebirth are part of a cycle, regardless of how you frame your own belief or lack of it in reincarnation. The process of nature is that of something becoming and it ending and becoming again and ending. Think of the seasons. Every year, all the leaves on the trees, on the deciduous trees, die. That's death. But in the spring, they're reborn again. And Pluto is the magic that occurs after death and before rebirth. Pluto is everything out of sight. Pluto is the hidden realms. In fact, Pluto is the lord of the underworld in traditional mythology. The underworld, the hell realms. Now, some of you have heard me do this before. I call this my brief Christian disclaimer. Not that I'm disclaiming Christianity. I'm simply disclaiming the Judeo-Christian belief that hell is the underworld. And you have to go to some of the Eastern mythologies. Tibetan Buddhism does this one well. And hell is only one slice of the complexity of the underworld, where everything that does not exist here and now exists in the Plutonic realms, in the realms of the underworld. In the 20th century, we began to realize that the underworld is actually equivalent to the unconscious. Everything that is out of our present moment is part of the Plutonic underworld. Now, the underworld has incredible power on us, and the way we depower the underworld is by shining a light into it. This is why we do therapy. This is why we meditate. This is why we learn, because as we learn, we can take those ghosts and demons and those things that haunt us, and we can confront them, and we can shine the light of awareness, the candle, the illumination, and we can see what was hidden, and we can engage them. And most things, I wanted to say all things, but most things are less frightening once we've engaged them. Not everything. There's a rabbit hole we're not going into tonight. Okay, or down tonight. Okay, so the thing about Pluto is about the wealth that is underground. And understand that historically, the wealthy people did not have money. They owned what was underground: diamonds, gold, silver, copper, tin, and so on. That was wealth. Do you know what our government is called? A plutocracy. Why? Because it's run by those people who have hidden wealth, not just a lot of money, but money beyond our understanding of cash, because they own the underground, the hidden wealth. Okay, now what the hell does this have to do with my birthday being today and tomorrow? And it's this. For those of you who have been studying or interested in astrology, for a couple of years now, astrologers have been talking about the United States is going through its Pluto return. That 2022 and 2023 were when Pluto returned to where it was when the United States was born, at late degrees of Capricorn. Here's the problem. It's the problem of why my birthday is today and tomorrow. It's the problem of why spring doesn't fall on the same day every year, and that is that the Earth wobbles, and it wobbles backwards, and it wobbles backwards if you spin a top, and as it slows down, it begins to wobble, but it wobbles backwards to the direction it's spinning. And the Earth does that, and one wobble is about 25,000, almost 26,000 years, which means that the wobble is what creates our seasons. And what that means is that there's a slippage of about 1 degree every 72 years between where the stars are in the sky and where the sun aligns with those stars on the first day of spring, which is what we call 0 degrees of Aries. So astrologers all over the world have been saying that the United States is experienced its Pluto return in 2022 and 2023. However, I went to the NASA webpage. I didn't really, this is a story. But I know that on the NASA webpage, it says that Pluto makes one complete orbit around the sun every 248 years. So let's see. 2024 minus 248, 1776. Oh, 1776. Pluto has completed one orbit. So remember, the sun is about illumination, our birthday, it's celebration, it's vitality. Saturn is about growing up and being serious. What's Pluto? Pluto is about death and rebirth. Pluto is about deconstruction and reconstruction. And whether you use the tropical, that's the seasonal, that takes the wobble into consideration, and say that Pluto returned in 2022, 2023 for the United States, or if you use the sidereal, which is mapped against the stars, and acknowledge that really Pluto is just right now completing one orbit around the sun from the day that the Declaration of Independence was signed. Whichever way you do this, it's not important, because we're not talking about a moment, we're talking about a transition. We're talking about Pluto moves so slowly that rather than creating an electrical spark like lightning, it creates a glacier that can take hundreds of years to take down a tree or a mountain. And so we are in this process of death and rebirth, deconstruction, reconstruction, and that which was hidden in the plutocracy is becoming illuminated by the light of awareness. And this is one of the reasons why we do astrology. I hope that little kind of makes a little bit of sense. I know we've talked about this from different perspectives here at different times, but it just seemed somehow to be exceptionally important tonight, because during the mid-late 1700s, Pluto, at the same place in the sky as it is now, for the first time in 248 years, Pluto was moving from the sign of Capricorn, where it had been for a couple of decades, into Aquarius, where it is now and will be for a couple of decades. And this is something also that astrologers all over the planet have been talking about and writing about, because there's a vast difference between any planet in Capricorn. How many people do we have here who are Capricorns, or Capricorn rising, or moon in Capricorn, or have the ruling planet of Capricorn, which is Saturn, somewhere in their chart? Okay, everybody. So Capricorn is like Saturn. It's about structure and stability, and it's fundamental reality. And when Pluto went through Capricorn for the past 20 years, in fact, when Pluto first moved into Capricorn in 2008, that was the beginning, that was the banking disaster, the real estate meltdown. And interestingly enough, when Pluto moved into Aquarius last March, that was right when the banks began failing, the Silicon Valley Bank. And so when Pluto was in Capricorn, the fundamental structures were being brought down so that they could be rebirthed. What are some of the fundamental structures of the United States? How about the Constitution? How about our court system? How about our government? How about the entire fiscal monetary banking system? And of course, things like roads and bridges and infrastructure, structure, this is all Capricornian. Now, Aquarius is very different because Capricorn has to do with three-dimensional reality, that which looks real. Okay, it may not be as real as we think it is, but that's another rabbit hole, not for tonight. Aquarius, on the other hand, is an intellectual, metaphysical, meaning it's not physical. Aquarius is the water bearer, but it's not a water sign. Water in astrology is emotions, it's feelings. Aquarius is an air sign. But if the air doesn't have water in it, it doesn't conduct electricity or emotions. The nervous system requires wetness for a signal to go down the nervous system. It's the, see if I can get this right. It's the sodium-potassium channel that creates the electrical reaction in the nervous system, and it requires moisture. Aquarius is the water bearer because the air carries moisture so that there's feelings communicated. Aquarius is a conceptual sign. It's intellectual. It has to do with community. It has to do with technology and the future. It's related in modern astrology, not only to Saturn as it was in ancient astrology, but to Uranus, the planet of technology, the planet of the future. Uranus is the quantum planet. It's the planet that astrologers, oh, they love this line. If you have a strong Uranus thing happening in your chart, the astrologer will say, oh, expect the unexpected. The fuck does that mean? Expect the unexpected. Well, it's like being in a storm and you see the lightning and you can hear the thunder and you know that the lightning is going to strike again, but you don't know when and you don't know where. I'm a photographer. I've photographed lightning. Well, I've tried. I mean, you can pan and you can get, you can aim at a sky and you can get lightning strikes. But, if you're aimed here, the lightning will strike there, and then you move the camera. That's Uranus. Uranus is electrical and sudden. And and Uranus, in its electrical and suddenness, relates to the sign Aquarius. What does this have to do with now? What it has to do with now is that Pluto tipped into Aquarius last March, actually the week that ChatGPT became announced in public. And Uranus is the planet of technology and future, and AI is certainly part of our future. And if you haven't heard this before, you can say, I heard it first from Rick. And that is, AI is not the main game, it's ASI. You will hear ASI more and more and more if you've never heard it. And AI, as you know, is artificial intelligence, although I kind of have problems with the word artificial there, but that's another topic. ASI, which is where this is going, is artificial superintelligence. And that's really the main player that we're looking at here. But Pluto, as it moved into Aquarius last March, and then by May, it turned retrograde and backed into Capricorn. And then by this January, it moved back into Aquarius, where it's going to be most of this year. It's going to tip back because of the retrograde motion. It's going to tip back into Capricorn in September, October, November, election day. And by the end of the year, it's going to be back in Aquarius, where it'll be for the next 2 decades. When Pluto moves into Aquarius every quarter of a millennium, every 248 years, there's a period of about 20 years of reorganization of the collective. It happened in the late 1700s, not just with the American Revolution, but with the French Revolution. We moderners can't understand how big a deal it was to have a nation state that was not ruled by someone who was divinely inspired by a bloodline that gave them the right to own the country. That was, I mean, even in England, where there were forms of representation, there still was the monarchy that was the absolute reign. And at the movement of Pluto into Aquarius last time round, we saw this huge shift. And that shift right now is undergoing a test. It's undergoing a death and a rebirth, because in concept, it's a brilliant idea, but it's not working the way we moderners think it should be working. It's working exactly the way it was supposed to work as it was set up then, because it was a very different environment, and it was set up to be a rule by those people who were real people. Meaning white landowners. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. So to say that the United States government and the judicial system is not working is not true. It's working exactly the way it was set up to work. But at the same time, it's also being deconstructed. And power doesn't give up power easily. And that's why these days are so crazy. Now, let's come to April of 2024, because I've just described the shift from, let's say, even going back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2010s, 15, all the way up. This is a much larger shift. But now in 2024, in April, we are at the pinnacle point. Pinnacle. Oh, I like that. We are at the point of a turning point that has to do with moving away from the preparation that we've done to reach this particular point in space and time. Pluto now is in Aquarius. It'll touch back into Capricorn, like I said, during the election, and that in itself has its own interesting kind of thing going on around it. But we are now, after a few years, and in particular, late last year, all the planets were retrograde. All right, let me stop and just say a few words about retrograde, because we're going to come back to Mercury retrograde here pretty darn quickly. And that is that because the Earth is moving around and all the planets are moving around at different rates, when a planet gets close to Earth, it looks like it's moving backwards. It's not really, but it's like if you had something right here in front of you that was stationary and you walk this way, it looks like it looks like it's moving the other way. So when a planet gets real close to us and we go by it, it looks like against the background like it's moving backwards. It's not really. It just means that planet is closer to Earth than it can get in any time in its cycle. Now, Mercury and Venus get closer to Earth when they come between the sun and the Earth, like they do. They're faster than Earth. They catch up to Earth. In fact, Mercury takes 88 days to go around the sun, so it catches up to the Earth once, well, 3 times every year, 3 or almost 4 times, but because it catches up to the Earth, as it gets closer to the Earth, it begins to look like it's going backwards. This is Mercury retrograde. Now, the outer planets get closer to Earth when they're on the same side of the sun as the Earth, but the Earth is in the middle, so they look like they're opposite the sun. So anyone who has a chart that they know their own chart, anyone who has Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto opposite the sun, it has to be retrograde because that means it's closer to Earth. Why does this matter? Planets are like broadcast stations, like radio stations. If you live next door to a 50,000 watt AM radio station, you can turn on your radio and almost tune it anyway, and that damn station's going to come blasting through. However, you get in your car and you drive away, eventually that station will get, weaker and weaker until you can't even tune it anymore. So here's the deal. It's the ancients, retrograde planets to the ancients were a bummer. They're traditionally a difficult or negative period of time. And I know why. It's because they get louder. And ancient people didn't have the room to move like we do in modern times. You were born into a family, into a place, you lived out your life. Whatever your role was, that was it. There was no room for the quote unquote personal growth that we have in our world. And as such, if you were, let's say, a young woman born with Mercury retrograde or lined up with the sun, but close to the Earth, which meant that your mind was really like that radio station, active and really, really buzzing all the time. And you looked around and your older brother was being sent to the university to become a priest and learn how to read and write Latin and Greek. And you were a woman, you weren't allowed to read or write, and in fact, you weren't even a person. You were just someone's property until your family, basically paid someone to take you. We called that dowry. The thing here is that when a planet is retrograde, and we're speaking about Mercury right now because it is retrograde right now, it's the only planet retrograde. And also it's the planet that when it changes from direct to retrograde, it changes the fastest. Mercury moves faster than any of the other planets or real planets. We astrologers include the sun and moon and anything that moves as a planet. The word planet is a Greek word from planeta, which means wanderer. So by that token, by that definition, there are about 300,000 or 400,000 things going around the sun that are planets because they wander, they move. NASA tracks them, but only 8 of them right now are considered to be quote unquote official planets. We astrologers don't care that Pluto was demoted and is no longer a planet. By the same token, we don't care that the sun and moon were demoted. We astrologers call them planets, not because we're stupid, but because we know the original meaning of the word planet, and it's just a matter of definition. So Mercury, if you're, let's say you're in an 18-wheeler truck, and you're going in a parking lot like a quarter of a mile an hour, just inching along, and the driver hits the brake and puts it into reverse, you might not even barely notice. But if you were in a Porsche and driving 70 miles an hour, slammed on the brakes and threw it into reverse, your life would change. Mercury is like that Porsche. Because it moves so fast, we notice when it stops and appears to go backwards. The outer planets, they have their impact, but they're not quite as strong. And astrologers really do notice and pay attention to Mercury, Venus, and Mars as they, station. Because, and station means stop. Because if you think of a pendulum, the pendulum is moving the fastest in the middle of its cycle. But when it reaches either side of the cycle, it slows down. And then it stops. And then it reverses direction very slowly, and then it picks up speed. And that's what the planets do too. And so when the planets change from direct to retrograde or retrograde to direct, they have to station or stop to change direction. And that's often when the faster moving planets, Mercury in particular, do that. That's when we often notice things happening. Now, there's nothing wrong with a Mercury retrograde. Anybody who's been told by an astrologer, don't sign any contracts when Mercury is retrograde, don't travel when Mercury is in retrograde, don't do anything important. Again, it's like 2.5 months a year that it's crazy. The problem is that because our mind is moving so fast when Mercury is retrograde, we feel like everything is so important, we need to do it right now. Did you notice the timing difference? My foot didn't go down at the now. It went down like an Aries. It went down prematurely. Right now. No, that's a Capricorn. Let me try that again. Right now. All right. Anyhow, what happens when Mercury is retrograde is we get distracted by the urgency and the immediacy of the present moment. Not that the present moment is unimportant, but we tend to think that, oh my God, I didn't do this and I need to do it right now. And that becomes problematic. And so the reason why people make dumb decisions, they get directions mixed up, they mix up appointments. I say they as if I never do this. I never do this. There's something that happens though when Mercury turns retrograde that is even beyond that. In fact, the 2 biggest internet outages that ever occurred on the moment that Mercury turned retrograde, and like half of the United States went out once. Cisco routers just died. Sam, are you doing something that I need to know about? No. Oh, okay. Sam's the tech guy who's writing something in the air in front of us. Anyhow, so there is a reality to Mercury retrograde. However, there's a benefit to it also. And the benefit is that we're given time to look back and see what we didn't do in the past and to incorporate things so that when Mercury turns direct, we then get to move again into the future with our thoughts, with our communication, with our ideas. April is an incredibly intense point in time. It's incredibly potent as far as the decisions and the things that we'll decide to do this month. But don't do them yet. And it doesn't mean be inactive. You know what they say when someone says go with the flow, the saying is only dead fish go with the flow. I mean, you can go with think of going with the flow as a surfer. If a surfer is not paying attention to the wave, they wipe out. Are you with me? So we're going with the flow, but we're doing it with awareness. And we're not making any crazy changes of direction right now while there's a combination of 3 things going on this month. in the midst of a larger cycle of Pluto returning to where it was when the United States was born, Pluto moving into futuristic Aquarius. But the three things that are happening in April are, one, Mercury turned retrograde on, can't make this shit up, April Fool's Day. And it remains retrograde through the 25th of April. I think that's the date. And yet when a planet turns retrograde, again, what it means is it's moving forward and then it slows down, it goes backward over a part of the area where it's been traveling, and then it turns direct and it moves forward again. So all the planets move like this. And there's areas where they cover that area not once, but 1, 2, 3 times. 3 strikes and you're out. Things happen in threes. Things really do happen in threes because often a planet hits a sensitive point in our chart, direct, it retrogrades, goes back over it, something else happens. Oh my God, I did that wrong. I need to redo it. Then it goes direct and it's like, now I know what to do. And so the Mercury shadow, that area where it goes direct, retrograde, direct, really is from mid-March until early mid-May. And this is the area that we're being focused on right now. And this is a large part of what April is about. Now, we add to that the fact that we're having a rare solar eclipse that's a total eclipse. Now, there are 4 or 5 eclipses every year. They come in pairs, a new moon and a full moon eclipse, or a full moon and then a new moon eclipse. We had the full moon eclipse a couple of weeks ago, and the new moon eclipse is on Monday, April 8th. Not every eclipse is exactly right on, because although we have a new moon once every month, when the moon catches up to the sun in the next sign, so there's 12 new moons a year where the moon catches up to the sun once a month. However, the moon's orbit is tilted compared to the Earth's orbit around the sun, which means that at the moon is coming across the sun, but it's higher or lower than the sun, so it doesn't block it out. The point at which the Earth's orbit around the sun is intersected by the moon's orbit around the Earth creates what we call the nodes of the moon. Nodes are just intersection points. I don't want to go too deeply into this. I have lectures on this online if you're interested in digging deeper. But the nodes are significant because everything in the three-dimensional world is not physical. There's no such thing as things. Everything that is a thing is actually an artifact of high-frequency vibrations, that when subatomic events crisscross, they create ripples that are called nodes or standing points. And it's like if you throw 2 rocks into a pond and the ripples go out, the water isn't moving out, the energy is moving outward. And where they cross, they make points that don't move. And the entire three-dimensional world, what the Hindus call Maya, is an illusion that's created by ripples, high-frequency waves. So the wave of the moon going around the wave of the Earth around the sun create these nodes. When there's a new moon or a full moon that's lined up with these magical nodal points that are kind of like vortexes into other dimensions, that's when we get an eclipse. And eclipses can be very potent. And this particular eclipse is a total eclipse, and it's also the path of absolute totality goes across the United States from roughly Texas up through the Northeast, up through, I think, Cleveland and that area, and up into Canada. Now, this eclipse is potent because A, all total eclipses are, B, because it's activated during this Mercury retrograde cycle, and C, because it's also happening at the time of the third event. I said earlier, there are 3 things in April: Mercury retrograde, the eclipse on April 8th, and then we come to the third thing, which has to do with a once every 14-year alignment from Earth's point of view of Jupiter Jupiter, the magnifying lens, Jupiter, the biggest planet, Jupiter, the planet of bigger and better and more, Jupiter, the planet of opportunity and expansion, and Jupiter is Optimus Maximus. It's the biggest and the best. And Jupiter is the king of Olympus, the king of the gods, except contrary to what Mae West used to say, too much of a good thing is not necessarily a good thing. Because as Hippocrates said, any tonic in excess is toxic. Jupiter is expansive. And what is it expanding? You see, Jupiter takes 12 years to go around once. But in that amount of time, Uranus, which takes 84 years to go around once, has moved a bit down the road. So it takes Jupiter 12 years to go around once and then another couple of years to catch up to Uranus. And when Jupiter and Uranus align, they align in a way that creates artifacts in our culture that are quite significant. And in fact, we'll come back to that in just a moment. But Uranus, remember, is the planet that relates to Aquarius. Now we're making the connection because remember, Pluto is in Aquarius, and now we have Jupiter and Uranus lining up for the first time while Pluto is in Aquarius. And what does Jupiter do? Is it opens the door. It widens the opportunities into the future, into the technology, into whatever it is that the next 14-year cycle of this Jupiter-Uranus will bring. So this occurs on April 20th. However, these two planets move slowly. Jupiter, Jupiter as a 12-year cycle moves pretty quickly compared to Uranus, which is an 84-year cycle, or Pluto, which is a 250-year cycle. But they are already within a couple of degrees of one another. And so we're already feeling this. And Jupiter-Uranus together is technological breakthrough. It's awakening of new ways of looking at things. And if we go back in history, we can look at things like Darwin's theory of evolution was published on a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Freud's interpretation of dreams, in fact, Max Planck's first work on what the subatomic particles were like in, I think, 1900 was also on a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And in fact, as long as we're on the scientific run, the Copenhagen group of Einstein and Bohr and Max Born and I said Niels Bohr and Heisenberg and Paul Dirac and these guys that created what we call quantum physics. Their first meeting was in 1927 at a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Steve Wozniak Steve and Steve Jobs. Was it Steve? Are they Steve and Steve? The two Steves built their first computer when Jupiter and Uranus were aligned. And there are many, many other events. Oh, in fact, the Apollo moon landing and I wrote this down because I knew I wouldn't remember the date, although I remember watching it on TV. I remember sitting in my parents' living room being stoned out of my mind. No, and look, this was 1969, okay? And watching on this black and white TV, us landing on the moon. Oh my God, that was pretty crazy. But that was July 20th, 1969. And you know what? The moon was lined up. The moon moves quickly. The moon moves like through a sign in a couple of days. It moves a degree every couple of hours. But at the time of the landing on, I already forgot, on July 20th, 1969, the moon was lined up with Jupiter and Uranus, which were aligned. You can't make this shit up this good. Oh, things like the telegraph was discovered in the year that there was a Jupiter-Uranus alignment. The light bulb in 1879 was discovered on a Jupiter-Uranus alignment. The first radio broadcast was in 1920 on a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. The first internet transmission prior to it being public, while it was still part of the military, was in 1969, the same year as the moon landing on the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And it was 1976 that that Jobs and the Woz made their first computer, which became Apple Computer. So this is where we are at, right now. We're at this point, and although I focused on the scientific stuff, literary, musical, artistic of all different sorts, the breakthroughs you can trace backward and backward and backward. And so we're at this point of incredible awareness and awakening and opening, and yet Mercury is retrograde. We're being forced to look backward. And with Pluto moving into Aquarius, we're seeing this reality that we thought was structure falling apart. And it's frightening. I mean, okay, I'm an astrologer. I'm supposed to know what's around the next corner. I did a radio show broadcast this afternoon for this podcast that's been, I don't know, they've been on, I think, for about 13 years now, called Truth Be Told. And he said, I have one question for you, the astrologer, before we go. What's going to happen in November? And I said, no problem. I know what's going to happen. What's going to happen in November depends on what each and every person does between now and November. And this is it's like my same old story. The future is not written in stone any more than the past. And I know I hear people go, oh, no, wait. The past is written in stone. And that's not true. The past is just as flexible as the future. And you go, no, this happened to me in the past. You can't change that. Go to therapy. No, I mean, I'm not saying that to be funny, because that's why we go to therapy. We can't change the future, but we can correct what we thought the past was, which then changes the choices that we have in the present moment, which then gives us the ability to make choices that change the trajectory into the future. And anyone who says that astrology is frightening because it's fated, it basically seals everything up. No, astrology gives you the ability to see patterns that were invisible, that give you more choices in the present moment, that then can determine what's going to happen in the future and alter your trajectory. What's going to happen in November? I don't know. We're at a turning point right now where everything is very fluid and very flexible. I might have said this last month here, but I'm going to say it again. Copper is absolutely malleable. It's so malleable, we can't use it for war. We can't use it for appliances that hold their edge. Tin is just as malleable, but it's brittle. You bend tin and it breaks. You melt tin and copper together and you mold it, and as it cools into bronze. Once it's bronze, that's it. You're done. You're not going to remelt it, and you're not going to change it into something else, and it will hold the position that it is, because an alloy made up of two things is different than what the two things were that were malleable going into it. We, in April, and really all of 2024, but in April in particular, we are at a point where the alloy of copper and tin, for lack of, I mean, it works with other things also, is beginning to cool. And by the time we get to the end of this year and on into next year, and 2025 and 2026, we talked about Pluto moving, slow-moving Pluto moving out of Capricorn and into Aquarius. That is certainly an important thing. But the other slow-moving planets, Uranus and Neptune, in 2025, 26, will also change signs. And it's very rare for Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all to change signs at the same time. I mean, Pluto can be in a sign from 15 to 35 years. Same with Neptune, more closely about 15 years. Uranus about 7 years. But for them to all change signs in effect together is rare. And so what's going to happen is that by the time we get to the other side of this presidential election in the United States, by the time we get to 2025, our chance to change things is going to be done for a while. Doesn't mean it'll be that way forever, but that's where we are right now. So, as I often say, as I like to say as often as I can, think cosmically, act locally. And thinking globally isn't good enough anymore because we can read the news and we can see what's going on around the world. And what's going on around the world right now is pretty crazy. I mean, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter what level your denial is in. And look, to survive, we're all in some levels of denial. In fact, scientifically, we know that the brain's job is not to make us smart, it's to make us dumb. And I'm not here being funny, that the brain is actually a reducing valve that gives us the illusion of linear time, that gives us the ability to work with cause and effect. And it does that by eliminating all the sensory impressions that we would otherwise have that don't get in the way of us making our moment-to-moment decisions. And if you don't believe me, just drop a heroic dose of LSD and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Not that I'm suggesting that anyone should do that, of course. But the point is that we are all in some level of denial. And we have moments when we can open up. And opening up doesn't mean just reading the news, because that still is closed in its own way. It doesn't just mean being aware of what's going on around you. It means thinking cosmically, going out as far as we can to widen our perspective, to make that which was invisible visible. Bringing the light of awareness, the sun, a candle in the dark of the Plutonic cave of that which was hidden, that has power over us. But it does no good at all to think cosmically unless you act locally. And that is basically what our calling is. And for some people, it means feeding people in the Gaza Strip where they lose their lives. For some people, that's what they do. For other people, it just means getting over whatever your fears are about parenting and not doing the same shit to your kids that your parents did to you. In other words, there's all different levels of acting locally, but if we don't in some way transfer this greater awareness into our individual lives, it's just sophism. It's just like mental masturbation. It does no good at all. There's no reason to do it. And that to me is the beauty of astrology. All right, we're just about at a transition point here. We've been about an hour, but I do want to bring up a chart. Somewhere here. There we go. This will just take a moment. How are we doing out there? Has this made sense? Is this okay? I see some. I can't tell whether they're thumbs up or fingers up because I'm not wearing glasses, but something's up. All right, let's see what we got going here. Come on, there should be a chart here any moment. And once there is, I'm going to, there we go. No, there we go. All right. What I want to do is I want to bring up a quick chart for so what, oh, I need to share my screen, don't I? Hang on one second, everyone. So, oh, and no, we don't want to restart the computer now. Thank you very much. Sometimes. All right, hold on. I'm going to put my mic down just for a quick sec. Okay, here we go. And I think you guys online, if someone online can type whether you actually see a chart now, as you should, that would be nice. And that way Sam can tell me that you guys actually can see the chart. And And what we're looking at is a chart for this evening, 7:35 p.m. here in Redmond, Washington. However, I don't have a horizon in this chart. This is called an Aries rising chart, which means that there are no houses, there's no ascendant, there's no midheaven, but that means that wherever you are online, wherever you are in the world, you can actually, the planets are in the same location, that it doesn't matter whether you're in Redmond, Washington, Istanbul, or Hong Kong, the moon at this moment is at 9.5 degrees, 9 degrees and 30 minutes of Pisces. And what we notice here is that all of the planets, this is the nodal axis here at 15 Libra and 15 Aries. So this isn't a planet, this is just the opposite point of where the point of which the moon's orbit crosses the Earth's orbit around the sun. But what we notice is that there's an incredible condensation, compression of, well, Pluto having just moved into Aquarius at 1 degree 56 minutes, almost 2 degrees of Aquarius. But then we get here to Pisces, and we have the moon just a degree away, a degree and a half away from Mars. The moon at 9.5 degrees of Pisces, Mars at 10, almost 11 degrees of Pisces, then Saturn at 14 Pisces, then Neptune at 28 Pisces, and then we have Venus, the nodal axis, the north node of the moon, the sun, Chiron, and Mercury, all in Aries. And look at the Jupiter-Uranus. Remember, I said they are exactly conjoined on April 20th. Well, you can see here how they're already only 2.5 degrees apart. That's 18.5 degrees to 21 degrees is about 2.5 degrees. And if we were to move this forward, which we will in just a moment, you can see how on April 20th, they will be at the exact same degree, exact same minute. So what I'm trying to show is that what I've been talking about is actually represented by the map here. And here we can see also that the moon is moving toward, because the moon moves faster than any of these planets, the moon is moving toward its conjunction with Mars, which it'll reach in about 3 hours. How do I know that? I know the moon moves about 1 degree every 2 hours. And I can see that the moon at 9.5 degrees of Pisces is about 1.5 degrees away from the sun at just about 11 degrees of Pisces. So it's about 1.5 degrees, 1 degree every 2 hours, that's 3 hours. So tonight is going to be a high energy night. And if you guys are getting me in a more forceful manner than I often am, it's because A, it's my solar return. The sun is lighting up my being where it was when I was born. And B, the key planet of Aries, which is Mars, is lining up with the moon. However, we can see that over the next couple of days, and I'm going to move this forward here. I'm going to move this forward. I'll just do it an hour at a time. Well, actually, I'll do it a half a day at a time. And we'll see that that 12 hours later, the moon, because in 12 hours, how far will the moon move? About. It moves 1 degree every 2 hours. So in 12 hours, thank you very much. Did you do that without Excel or? No, cool. All right. So roughly 9 and 6 is roughly 15, but it's not exact. It'll be in that neighborhood. So if I move this ahead 12 hours, there's the moon. Okay, it's already at 17, but you see how that math works? And now the moon is moving later on in Pisces. This is tomorrow morning, April 6th. And then by tomorrow night, the moon is at 24 Pisces. And then by April 7th, the moon has moved into Aries, and actually the moon moves into Aries at, boom, 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 boom. The moon moves into Aries at 4:24 a.m. on the morning of April 7th. And of course, that is Pacific Daylight Time. But look at the sun over here at mid-Aries and watch what happens as I move this ahead again another half a day. This is now April 7th in the evening. And by April 8th in the morning, look at where the moon is. And in fact, if we were to put in the time of the eclipse, does anyone know what it is? I think it's 11:20 a.m. Is that right? Look, there is the moon. Now, can you see what we're looking at here? This is the nodal axis, and we can see how close the new moon is. It's only 4 degrees away from the nodal axis. And when you have a new moon or full moon, that's within about 12 degrees or so. It varies, lunar versus solar eclipse, 12 to 17 degrees. That's when an eclipse occurs. But this is close enough that it's a total eclipse. The moon is at 19 degrees and 24 minutes of Aries. The sun, this is totality, is at 19 degrees and 24 minutes of Aries. But we have a photo bomber. We have Chiron at 19 degrees and 24 minutes. And in all my years of astrology, I've never seen an eclipse, visible or not visible, total or not visible or not total, that was exact, not to the degree, but to the minute, 1/60th of a degree aligned with something else. So what the hell is Chiron? So Chiron was discovered in 1977, and it was announced as a new planet. And then they realized it's not a planet, it's a comet. And then they said, no, it's not a comet. This all unfolded in a matter of weeks. And then they said, no, it's not a comet, it's an asteroid. And then they said, wait, nope, it can't be an asteroid because it's between the orbits of Saturn and Uranus. And asteroids are, by definition, in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. It's something we've never seen. What is it? And they called it an in-between something. It's a centaur. Centaurs are in between, half animal, half human. And Chiron was, it was named Chiron because mythologically Chiron was a centaur. And Chiron was a pretty special centaur. He was really smart. And Chiron was smart enough that he was a teacher and a healer. And Chiron, the story is that Chiron was wounded critically, a wound to the thigh, and that I'm sure has a sexual connotation to it. And I don't mean that to be funny. There's a brilliant book by the Jungian psychologist Robert Johnson called The Story of the Fisher King and the Handless Maiden, 2 stories that appeared in the Grail period in the 500s, 600s, 700s in Europe. And it's about the subtitle of the book is something like a critical analysis of the wounded feeling function in Western society. Okay, so Chiron is known as the wounded healer because as humans, we all have a wound. We all have wounds that no amount of therapy, sex, drugs, rock and roll, yoga, meditation, love is going to cure. It's just what makes us human. And I mean, they may be in our teens or 20s, overtake our entire life. And by the time we're in our 30s or 50s or 70s, or maybe not, they're just like nebbishes. They're just like little things that come and go. They're part of who we are. So Chiron was the original mentor. Chiron taught Asclepius medicine. Chiron taught Hercules the art of war. And Chiron was so brilliant that the gods, the Olympian gods, took mercy on Chiron and granted him immortality. However, they didn't fix his critical wound. So it's that part of us that doesn't die that has a critical wound. And we often then either live it out invisibly or we project onto other people that wound and we try to fix it out there. That's why the book, The Story of the Fisher King, is the wounded king who couldn't be upright and procreate and become a real king. So he was fishing, and that fishing, it's not trout fishing in America, it's Christ fishing for souls. And so the wounded healer looks for people out there to solve their own pain. We all do that to some extent. That's what we do as we go through life. So what does this mean? This is a totally, absolute, totally. I think that's a double entendre. This is totally a moment It's totally ecliptically a moment. Actually, I have a friend who I'm not going to out, but her name is Gail, who accidentally slipped in talking on the phone the other day, slipped about this eclipse. And rather than saying eclipse, she called it a retroclipse, which is great because that's what it is. It's a retroclipse. Or an ecliptograde. I don't know, whatever. No, the retro word needs to be there. Anyhow, you can see here that Mercury ahead of the eclipse by about 5 degrees. That little RX means that it's moving backward towards the eclipse. If we go back to the current moment, we can see that Mercury right now is at 26¼ 26 degrees and 15 minutes. And if we move this again a half a day at a time, we can see that that Mercury now is at 25. And by the time the actual eclipse happens, it's back to 24 and then something. And if we followed that Mercury throughout the month, if we just pay attention to that red little Mercury, the one with the hat, and we just keep going, we can see there it is at 22, 21, 20, 19, and you can see that Mercury will back all the way up. There's Mercury at 16 degrees, and by the 25th of April, Mercury will begin to slow down. That little S that you can hardly see means station, and then it will turn direct, and then it will quickly whiz on through. You can watch that Mercury, and there it is basically clearing the shadow, and by mid-May going into Taurus. All right, so what is the fact that this eclipse has Chiron exactly conjunct the eclipse? It means that we have an opportunity, if we're conscious, to heal others around us and ourselves. It means that we have an opportunity to forgive someone for something, or someone's for some things, and to be given forgiveness for ourselves or to forgive ourselves. We have the ability to learn, but this isn't a Saturn discipline, someone beating the stick over your head saying, do these multiplication tables and learn these until you, it's not that kind of learning. It's the learning that has something to do with healing. And so this is a potentially an incredibly potent moment that we're already in, even though the eclipse isn't until Monday morning. And it's about this process of forgiving and being forgiven and learning by growing our awareness. And that means becoming vulnerable. That means dropping the illusion that I'm separate from you, which is, I mean, that's the basic illusion 101. Is that I am me and you are you, when the truth is, one of the wisest lines that Paul McCartney ever unconsciously wrote is, I am you as you are me, as we are all together. Goo goo gajoop. Okay. But this eclipse is incredibly important because of Chiron. And hopefully we're beginning to see some of these wounds of how our unconscious fears play out by acts of hostility, aggression, war, genocide, and that kind of process that is so ingrained that there's almost no way that we can get out of these patterns that are ingrained culturally, sociologically for years, for generations, for forever, it seems. And so we have potential here. Does that mean we're going to make use of it? I don't know. I'll let you know next month. But there's another thing here that is happening during the same period of time, and that is Mars, the planet of war, of anger, of hostility, of direction, of assertion, of aggression. Mars, the planet of ego, I am me, and therefore I need to survive, is moving day by day closer to the planet Saturn. And as it does, it will actually join up with Saturn. And you can see here by the 9th, by the 10th, it's within a few degrees. And by later on the 10th, Mars, you can see how Mars flips from one side of Saturn to the other. Mars catches up with Saturn. Mars, the planet of hot, Saturn, the planet of cold, Mars, the planet of the gas pedal, the accelerator, Saturn, the planet of the brake pedal. We hit a wall. If we're going too fast, it falls apart. The guardrail isn't there. We go off the track. However, if we can work the break, this can be incredibly powerful. So this is why this period is so important. And by the way, I want to end by just taking this up through the 20th, and we're going to watch here that Jupiter get closer and closer on April 20th. Jupiter in the morning is at 21 degrees, 43 minutes. And it's only, what, 5 minutes, that's 1/12 of an hour, 1/12 of a degree away from Uranus. And by that evening, again, can you see how Jupiter flips over that? Because Jupiter's moving faster. And that's the exact conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus, the opening, the opportunity for us to go somewhere where we've never been before, to use the Star Trek, concept, to explore, what is it? To explore new worlds. Yeah, to go where no man has gone, no human has ever gone before. So that's where we stand this month. And if you want a day-by-day, blow-by-blow description, as many of you know, I know some of you, how many of you are here because of the YouTube video? Okay, that I do a monthly YouTube video, and youtube.com/ and YouTube now uses the @ @Rick Levine, youtube.com/ @Rick Levine. And the featured video, the first one there, will be the monthly April forecast, in which I drill down the actual movement of the planets day by day and talk about what those events are. But I'm trying to make this monthly meeting here, gathering, different than what I do online, so that we're looking at a more global perspective. And so that brings me to the conclusion, but not quite yet, because I got 2 other things to say. 3 other things. One is that, much to the chagrin of the ownership of SoulFood, we have pastries here, and
I call them ass.
yes, and yes, it's been sanctioned, but if you happen to be a human who is into eating carbohydrates and sugar, you're in heaven, because they're here. That's number one.
And the cookies are gluten-free.
And the cookies are gluten-free, I am told. Number 2 is that if you haven't ordered anything, this would be your chance to do it at the bar before they close, because they will close while we're back in here together in a few more minutes. And so do that. And part of number 2 is that, although we do now have a cover charge for this, because the gracious people here, thank you very much, Makia, stays open beyond what their normal business hours are and has costs to incur. And as I think I've said to some of you online, I do this, I would say, out of the goodness of my heart, but my ulterior motive is always to spread the word. But that helps allay some of the costs. And so the $5 cover goes towards that. And if you can afford $10 or whatever, that goes to help other people who may not be able to pay to cover their expense, so that we can continue this. And I certainly appreciate and thank SoulFood and the baristas and those people here. Which brings me to the last part of point 2 out of 3, and that is that the best way you can vote tonight, act locally, even if you're thinking globally, is to buy something that you would otherwise maybe consider buying at some big box store or Amazon or whatever, because that's what helps keep places like this open. And it's not just about SoulFood, it's about that in life in general, patronize those people who are local rather than those people who are corporate. So if you got someone's birthday or something come up, there's a lot of cool shit here. Look at it, go buy it. All right, and then thirdly, we're gonna take about a 10-minute break. We're gonna come back and we're gonna look at 3 charts. If you've never had your chart done here before, there's these things which will be on this table, the table with the carbs and shugs. And this allows you to put in your name and your email address and your birth date, place, and time of day, including whether it's AM or PM. I will draw 3 of these out of a hat. We'll do 3 charts, kind of to give you an idea of how all this works on a one-to-one basis. If you don't want your chart done and you're not on my Soul Food mailing list, email list, fill out one of these anyhow. Just leave your birth data out and I won't call on you, even if I pick it. So, because I do send out a reminder every month to those people who have had their charts done here before, just to remind you of when the next event will be a day or two before. So these are here. I will pick out 3 of these out of a hat. We'll reconvene in about 10 minutes. For those of you who are online, the microphone will go dead. I think we leave the camera on, but we'll be back in about 10 minutes. And did I miss anything, Sam? Am I good? We good? And I guess that does it. Thank you all for coming out. And thanks for the birthday song, the birthday wishes that so many of you have given to me online. The April monthly, which was out, I posted that on the afternoon of April 1st. That's already pushing 40,000 views, and half of them are just happy birthdays. And also thank you for the birthday booty, which I won't trouble with you all with opening in front of you, or maybe I'll do it when we come back. If you know. And that's it. We're on break for 10 minutes, and we'll be back. Thank you. words and say them backwards. And so it became called the spoonerism. So let's get this road on the show. All right, I have a logistics problem here. And my logistics problem, which is kind of almost your problem, is here's the hat and here's the names to draw. So that doesn't work. So I think next time I have to tell you guys to fill it out and fold everything in half. But I'm going to turn these upside down. And I'm going to do a card trick. And I'm going to shuffle them. And now, all right, I want you to watch this trick. All right, pick a card. Don't tell me what it is. Pick a card. Don't tell me what it is. And Cindy, pick a card.
Sorry. Busy cleaning up.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it.
All right. Now, without looking at them, I'm going to guess who they are. You and you. I don't know who the third person is. Okay, so here's the deal, that what I'm going to do is not the same as a real individual consultation, but it's just really meant to be a flavor of what we can understand by looking at a birth or natal chart. And if you feel special that you've been picked, don't. Because it's not about you, it's about us. You see, if you have been picked, you're just being used. And so now if you get something out of it personally, wonderful. I mean, that's seriously, that's great. And I hope you do. But if I do pick your name, you have to understand that I will not use your last name. It is being live streamed and it'll be on the internet, and the camera won't be on you, but I will expect you to interact with me and be truthful. I will not put you in a position of saying, all right, so tell me what really happened in June of '71 or whatever. Now, I mean, I'll be very conscious of that. But in order for us to use you fully, sounds awful, you have to show up, and share with us. And if you're not willing to, and I've called your name and you decide you don't want to, let me know. We'll just pick another one that didn't fit in the hat either. So, okay. So first person is Jennifer, born in Milwaukee. Everyone's cheering for you, saying, shit, I didn't get picked. What was that?
I knew I was going to get picked.
Well, it's the power of intention. All right, let me unshare. I'm stopping the share, and I'm now going to go back and share my screen. And I'm going to put in Jennifer's chart. Now, this used to take by hand hours. I mean, literally hours. And we got Jennifer. Is the screen being shared, Sam? I know it'll take a few seconds yet. And it's 12/27/68. 12/27/68.
It's being shared.
And this is at 12:44 a.m. 12:44 a.m. And this is in on the scenic shores of Lake Michigan. Thank you. I knew it was a lake. Milwaukee. That's a W-I. And this magical software does a latitude and longitude lookup, corrects time zone, and da-da-da-da-da-da, comes up with a chart. So, Jennifer, what's your dance with astrology? What's your relationship with astrology?
Oh, I've been studying it and practicing it for quite a while.
So what's your ascendant? Okay, I just was checking because I have here that 14 degrees and 39 minutes of Libra is rising. And it's always good to check that because anyone who's an astrologer and has been doing astrology for a while has gotten to the end of a client consultation realizing they put in the wrong year. Shit happens. All right, so when I look at your chart, I have this thing about looking at charts, and I always do a what's the first thing that stands out. It's not always the most important thing, and when I look at a chart cold like this, it often takes a few minutes for me to kind of wend my way in to figure out really what's going on. Sometimes it happens in a flash, and sometimes it's 20 minutes or so into a consultation where it goes, now I got it. Usually involves some interaction. But when I look at your chart, the first thing that stands out is that you were born, obviously, at 12:44 a.m. That's close to midnight. And so we can see that the sun in your chart is down toward the bottom of the chart because this horizontal line across here is the surface of the Earth. And you were not born at sunrise. You were born at Jupiter rise. And in fact, Jupiter was just coming up over the horizon at 5 degrees of Libra when you were born, but you were also born just moments after the moon set and just moments or minutes before Saturn set. So that's, when I look at a chart, I always try to see what was the reality of what was actually going on out there physically. And with Libra rising and Jupiter rising in Libra, that suggests to me that whatever your sun sign is, which is Capricorn, and we'll get there in a few minutes, whatever sun sign you are, who you are, however you feel, your moon is in Aries. The fact is that when you interact with the outer world, it comes through that big, positive, expansive, optimistic Jupiter in Libra that's a people person, that somehow is an intermediary or always looking at some ways of going between situations to make them okay. Does that sound right? What do you do that in life that does that?
I call myself the head client clown. I do interior design work and I do a lot of clients interaction.
Okay, I would love to hear the whole story, but people online can't hear you. But Jennifer said that she called herself the client.
The head client clown.
Head client clown. Oh, I bet there's a good story behind that. But that you're an interior designer and therefore you're working, trying to make something happen from what you get from people as to what they want. But Libra is a sign that's related to Venus, the planet of aesthetic perfection, beauty. And the Libran sign is associated with all forms of art, but it's not necessarily the Venus that's physical. Venus related to Taurus is more about touch and taste and the senses, whereas Venus relating to Libra is more about the intellectual idea of what beauty is. And with Jupiter there, that becomes expanded. That becomes a, how do you make the magnifying lens on making that bigger or more? But now we look at the fact that, number one, that Jennifer is a Capricorn, and Capricorn is Saturn ruled. Saturn is the planet associated with Capricorn, and Saturn is about physical structure. We talked about that earlier. It's the planet that has to do with the apparent three-dimensional reality. And so here's the part of you that has your feet on the ground, Mercury at 17 degrees of Capricorn, near the sun, says you think in a grounded, practical, stable way, and that helps you then make things appear real. But Capricorn's key planet or ruling. I don't like the word ruling because to me, it comes from a patriarchal colonial understanding, which astrology largely was, I mean, it was written by guys for guys. Don't make any mistake about it. That doesn't mean that women, that the females didn't have a better understanding of the relationship of the human body to the cosmos through the moon cycles and death and rebirth and birth and all of that. But astrology, as we know it, largely is a patriarchal artifact. And as such, the traditional verbiage is Saturn is the planet that rules Capricorn. Saturn, again, is the planet of constriction and structure and reality. And Saturn in your chart was just about ready to set. And that setting point is like the point of other people in your life. The ascendant, the rising point, the sunrise is where the energy comes off of you. And the descendant point is where the energy comes back. Your moon and Saturn are conjoined about 5 degrees apart. And the moon is how we feel, it's how we react, it's how we respond. The moon and Saturn in Aries is Aries, we talked about earlier, it's that this time of year, it's the beginning, it's the spring, it's the creation. Aries is James Kirk, Captain Kirk, James, huh? William Shatner, thank you. William Shatner, Captain Kirk, he was an Aries because it's the going where no one's gone before. It's that pioneer. It's the doing something that no one's ever done. And with Aries energy, Aries thrives on being the first into something new. And so with Saturn there, though, is it holds it back just enough to make it real. And there's a little bit of frustration having a moon in Aries with Saturn so close, because there's a part of you that feels much further off the edge than Saturn lets you actually emote. And so it's an interesting little what's the technical word? Dilemma. But as I look at your chart, I also notice that there is a smooth connection between Neptune, the planet of dreams, and Chiron, the healer. And in some ways, this goes back to you doing what you do that in some way helps people heal their lives by what that magic is that you do. There are many other things here that I see. One of them is also the fact that Uranus, that planet of shock and surprise, the radical, we talked about earlier, what's a good word? The unexpected planet in your chart is actually lined up with the nodal axis, which we talked about earlier, that's the eclipse point, and Jupiter. So Uranus and Jupiter in your chart are 2 degrees apart, kind of like they are in the sky right now, but your chart happened after the exact conjunction. And so I would imagine that a week or so after April 20th, when Jupiter has already aligned with Uranus and moving away from it, that will resonate with you. And there's a part of you in your life that always has that kind of feeling like everything's opening up to potential, everything can go anywhere. It's not just optimism. It's like the heavens open and you can kind of see far. However, that's 90 degrees to your sun. And so there's this ongoing, constant, forever conflict between the part of you that has to make it real and the part of you that can imagine anything. How does that sound? Let the record reflect, for those of you who are online, that Jennifer just stood on the table. No, I'm kidding. That again, I can't tell whether it was the finger or the thumb, but I think it was the thumb. Yeah. So what's your favorite thing about your chart?
Well, being a Capricorn, I just want to talk about the conflicts, right? But I do like all the Libra energy that I have. It keeps me buoyant.
Okay, so again, just because they can't hear you online, I'm going to keep these short. So Jennifer said, being a Capricorn, she'd rather talk about, she said conflict, but what she really meant, I hope, is that she'd rather talk about the things that were harder than the things that were easier, because Capricorn energy will climb to the top of the mountain because the mountain is there. Because Capricorn's about hierarchy. Now, here's the thing with Capricorn, is if there's no mountain, they'll build the fucking mountain to have to climb to the top of it. Because there's something about showing, it's about mastery. Capricorn and Cancer actually have something very much in common, even though they're opposite signs, because they're both about mastery and the insecurity of not being a master. Capricorn shows its mastery by conquering the external world and mastering typically a craft or a profession or conquering a nation or something like that. Whereas Cancer manages its insecurity about lack of mastery by making a hard outer shell and not letting anyone see what's really going on. But they're the same issue. And so that sun being so 90 degrees square to Jupiter and Uranus, it's almost like every job you take is the potential to do something not only that you've never done before, but to do the most amazing thing that's ever happened in the world. And the Capricorn would rather struggle trying to make that happen than just aim at a hill rather than an impossible mountain. Yeah? Sound?
Yes.
So what's the worst thing in your chart? What do you hate in your chart? You don't have to hate, that's strong. What do you have a hard time with?
The moon in the sixth house in Aries.
Okay, so Jennifer said that the moon in the sixth house in Aries is hard. And I would ask you why, but I'll throw my thoughts out first and then ask you why. And first of all, the moon in Aries, unlike Capricorn, Capricorn is compulsive. Capricorn, when it gets an idea, it figures out what it needs to do in order to get it done, and then it does it. Aries, on the other hand, is like fire burning. It's intuitive, not in the sense that we normally think of Pisces being intuitive. We really mean psychic there rather than intuitive, because intuition is basically action without forming any thought. It's just, to Jung, intuition was fire, not water. Water is feeling. Fire doesn't think about where it's going to burn. Fire doesn't think, that's pine and that'll be easier to set fire, but that's oak. And if I can get that heated to the right amount, man, I could burn. It just burns. It just stays alive and it burns. So the Aries moon, 90 degrees or square to that Capricorn sun and Mercury, the internal dilemma becomes impulsive versus follow through. And the moon in Aries in the sixth house, which is not only, some people would say the sixth house is the house of health or daily routine, because daily routine determines our health. It's the house of work, because that's part of our daily routine. And with the moon in Aries, there's a part of you that likes to do new things and not finish them and just start and follow. And yet the Capricorn says, nope, you started that, you got to finish it. Now, you tell me why you don't like them or why you have a hard time, not that you don't like it.
Well, that's a big part of it. When I'm inspired, I can do anything. It's right now, but projects take a while, and I have to go to work every day, and sometimes I don't feel like it, and that really affects my.
Okay, and again, I'm not cutting you off because I don't want to hear, but because people online can't hear you because we don't have a traveling mic. But what Jennifer said was exactly what I said. No, I'm kidding. Online, they don't know. They think she just said, "Yup, exactly what you said, Rick." But it was again the difference between the impulsive, excitement and feeling of what can be done versus the routine of what you have to do in some ways. Now, just bringing this around to now, I would be interested in a couple of things just very, very quickly. And again, my intention is not to do a reading, but I notice in my mind that
both Pluto and Saturn moved through Capricorn through the late 20, up through the late 20 teens, or Pluto moved into Capricorn, in 2008. So in that period of time, Pluto moving through Capricorn and Saturn moving through Capricorn, the two of them lining up in January of 2020, right at the bottom of your chart, I would imagine that while everyone else was going through quarantine and COVID fears and whatever the hell everyone was going through, that for you, there was a turning point of which in some ways, the past 7, 8 years of Saturn moving through this part of your chart, the first, second, third houses, that it's almost like the tide changed and you're now kind of standing at a point in your life that's at the beginning of the next phase. There's somewhere that you're going and something that you're doing because both of those planets have come around the lowest point in your chart and are beginning to move upward. That's thought number one. Thought number two is that the eclipse on Monday is pretty much nailed to your Saturn. And therefore, there's something here personal about what's happening in this time frame, about your relationship or the limitations imposed upon you that would be Saturn from relationships. Does either of those make any sense?
The first one definitely did, the Saturn and Pluto moving past my son.
So Jennifer said the first part about the change in the direction of life over the last few years. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the second, we'll see.
We'll see. And I think also, I mean, the fact right now that Neptune is at 28 degrees of Pisces lined up with Chiron in your chart, there's also a little bit of fuzziness. It's hard to put your finger on exactly what it is that you know and don't know at this point in time. And that might be true for everyone. So anyhow.
Rick, can you close that Norton?
Can I do what?
Yeah.
That? Yeah. Thank you, Peter Norton. That's about it. How's that? Was that okay for you?
Thank you.
So good. So good is even better than okay. All right. That was Jennifer. Next, we have Bonnie. And Bonnie, I'm going to set the microphone down. Where's Bonnie? Bonnie, my Bonnie lies over. Yeah, Bonnie, if you want your thing done, you're going to have to come here and grab a chair and be forward. Otherwise, I can't do this. Thank you. Huh?
Come forward.
Yay, Bonnie. Okay, hang tight. Bonnie was born on 3/29/60, 3/29/60 at 9:15 a.m., 9:15 a.m. in Siwa. And Bonnie, what's your relationship with astrology, if you would?
Dabbler.
And do you have a Gemini rising?
Yeah.
All right, that makes 4 of us, because I do too. Some of you got that. Okay, so as I look at your chart, the first thing that stands out to me, two things stand out. Well, aside from the fact that you have a Gemini rising, which stood out first, because when an astrologer looks at another person's chart, regardless of what they say or what you think they're going to say, the first thing they notice in any chart they look at is their own chart. Oh, look, you have a Gemini rising, so do I. That was the first thing I noticed. So we're both more talkative, and maybe people think we're more clever than we think we are. And there's certainly this ability to interact, but it's not necessarily how we feel on the inside. It's the dance that we do. It's the dance we dance when we meet someone new, so we don't have to own up to the fact that we're really a stubborn Taurus. or whatever it is we might be, because that's what our ascendant is. It's both good news and bad news, but it's our cover. It's the way in which we meet other people. I love to say it's the dance we dance when we meet someone new. My older, smarter brother, older by only 3 months, and maybe not smart. Well, yeah, my older brother, Stephen Forrest, says that Stephen says that your rising sign, and his wording often is incredibly poetic. He says it's how we dawn on other people, because the rising sign is where a planet rises. When the sun rises, that's dawn. And so, yeah, so that Gemini is really important, but it's the fact that your Taurus moon, and the reason why I went to the moon rather than your sun, I'll come back to that in just a moment, is that every planet has a home sign, and every planet has a sign in which, when it's not at home, it's an honored guest. That's called exalted. And so a king or queen in his or her own castle has power. But sometimes it's cooler to be an honored guest somewhere else because you're treated really well. Well, the moon is at home in Cancer, but it's exalted in Taurus. And Bonnie has a moon in Taurus. And that moon in Taurus, for whatever reason, stands alone. It's not connected by aspects, at least the aspects we're looking at here, to all the other planets. And so there's something about, oh, you know what? That's not true. For some reason, the moon aspects are turned off here. Hold on a second. I'm going to eat my words. The date is right, but I was doing research before that I was not using the moon. And so what we're going to do here, well, we need to, well, I'm glad I caught that, because I was going to say all kinds of things that are not true. And now I'm seeing another whole dimension. Oh my God. And you didn't even correct me. I didn't get that far. It's not your responsibility. Aspected points, and I'm going to add the moon, which was unselected, and all of a sudden we're going to see a whole bunch more lines. All right, so now, and this of course is the danger of looking at charts cold, and I'm okay with it because, yeah, I'm okay with it. But what this tells me is that that Taurus moon is even more important than I was going to say that it was. And because the moon is exalted in Taurus, it likes being there. Why? Because Taurus is stable and the moon always changes. And so as emotions always change, they still feel like they're at home. And the moon in Taurus is part of you see this blue triangle? It's a grand triangle or grand trine that goes from Earth sign Taurus to Earth sign Pluto in Virgo to Earth sign Jupiter in Earth sign Capricorn. And so even though Bonnie might be interactive with you or I on an interactive basis, there's a whole lot of stability going on inside of Bonnie's world. And that's interesting because she's an Aries. And Aries are not necessarily the stablest people, or it's not necessarily the stablest energy, because as we talked about with Jennifer's chart and with my chart, I have several planets in Aries, we're interested in going someplace new. There's this drive to go forward, and yet Bonnie's chart has this kind of ability to hold that energy back enough. And with Pluto, the depth, the intensity, and the power, it's like you want to be Bonnie's friend. You don't want to be her enemy. I'm not saying that she has enemies or that you would be, but if you do something enough times to piss her off, you don't necessarily end up being a happy person. Am I wrong here? I mean, is it?
I have the stare.
She said, I have this stare. Look, Bonnie is a Gemini rising. So even when she's staring, there's a part of you that feels like that there's play still going on. I think that you can appear more lighthearted or more playfully interactive than sometimes you actually feel on the inside. But the Aries sun is kind of like a bit of an annoyance in your chart sometimes. I think sometimes my old friend Donna Cunningham, another brilliant astrologer who passed away a number of years ago, she was I'm an Aries with a Cancer moon. She was a Cancer with an Aries moon. And she had just gotten back from a trip to Peru where she took a private plane, a chartered plane to some high mountain in Peru to go to some temple. And she said, there I was stepping down off the steps of this plane. And my Aries moon and my Cancer sun, which were square, my Cancer sun is saying to my Aries moon, why do you take me to places like this? And I would imagine there's some of that issue in your life where there's this dance between those two things. Now, the other thing that I think is significant here in your chart is the fact that we have Saturn. Hold on one second. We have Saturn in the sky. Saturn in your chart, when you were born, interestingly, the planets in your chart, a lot of them are very powerfully placed. The moon is exalted in Taurus. The sun is at home in Leo, but it's exalted in Aries. Venus is exalted in Pisces. Mercury kind of sucks in Pisces traditionally because it's as far away from where it's exalted, which is in the opposite sign of Virgo. So Mercury, I think, suffers a little bit, or at least it's harder to figure out how to work with that Mercury. But then we go to Saturn, which is at home in Capricorn, and Jupiter, which is also suffers a little bit it has a hard time because Jupiter's expansive. So it's in its fall in Capricorn. My Jupiter's in Capricorn also, but I actually like my Jupiter a whole lot because it keeps me from jumping off of cliffs that I shouldn't jump off of. But what's important here is that Saturn in your chart is strong. And we know that Saturn takes about 30 years to go around once. So around age 28, 29, 30, you had your Saturn return. And that would have been in the late 80s, somewhere right in there. But then Saturn went around again, and by 2019, early even into 2020, Saturn was returning to where it was again. So that again is a kind of like a readjustment of your life and figuring out what you're going to do next and so on. But here's the thing, Saturn's moving toward the top of your chart. Saturn then moves through Aquarius, and then in March of last year, Saturn moved into Pisces. And Saturn will be in Pisces for the next couple of years, and then it moves into Aries, which means that Saturn is moving over all of these planets of yours or coming up to them in Pisces and then to Aries. And so for the next year, 2, even 3, there's going to be a part of your life that a lot of the life that you've lived is still coming to fruition and coming to you get what you deserve, kind of where you've worked, things will pay off, and where you haven't, they may fall apart or whatever. But it's kind of like a big deal thing with Saturn going through this part of your chart that I think in some ways is about what you've reached in the outer world, and maybe even the beginnings of pulling in and consolidating what you've done rather than trying to climb to another rung on the ladder higher. So does that make sense to you at all? Does that feel?
Yeah. Things are coming home to roost. Right.
In fact, Grant Louis, one of my favorite astrologers who wrote in the 1930s, 40s, and early 50s, used to say that when Saturn comes through the sign of your sun, which for you is about 2.5, 3 years away, when Saturn comes through the sign of your sun, it's the time, he wrote, when the chickens of ambition come home to roost. If you've been feeding them, they come home fat and happy, laying golden eggs. If you haven't, they come home scrawny, maybe even sick. And even if you have no money and no resources and no food, they're yours, you got to feed them. And typically it's not one or the other. Typically what happens is, your husband or wife leaves you and you get a Nobel Prize for your work. It's often both ends of the spectrum in different areas of your life. So that's it. Anything you want to say or
No, thank you.
no, wait. Here's where grammar is important. For those of you not here in present moment, who are here in present moment, but not in present state, let the record reflect that Bonnie said, no, thank you. And what she actually wrote in her mind was no, comma, thank you, period. Rather than no, thank you. Thank you. All right, and third and final, much to my chagrin, and I will explain why in just a moment, we have Lori. And in the spirit of full astrological disclosure, I must say that I've known Lori for 30 years. And we don't see much of each other these days, but we worked together on a number of things many moons ago. And so I'm going to put Lori's chart in only because I didn't have control over this. And if I did, I would have said, no, we're not doing this, but it's here. So there you go. And this is, I might have this in my file already, just thinking here. Before I go back and enter in all this data again, I'm going to, can I quit? Yeah. I'm going to just take a real quick look here and see if, you know what? I'm not going to do that because that'll bring up your last name and I don't want to do that. So we're going to just go back here to Lori. And this is 12/8/58, 12/8/58. And this is, I don't know what time of day you were born. Huh?
We'll do another time.
All right, no, we're going to do a short one, and we're just putting this in at noon. And this is a good example of what we can do without knowing a birth time. All right, we'll do this one quickly, but it's a good example here because when we don't have a birth time, we do not know the ascendant, therefore we do not know any houses. In fact, we don't even know the exact position of the moon because the moon moves about 12 degrees, 12, 13 degrees through a day. So I ran this for noon. So we know that Lori's moon is in Scorpio. How do we know that? Because at noon, it was at 20 degrees of Scorpio, which means at the beginning of the day, it couldn't have been much before 14 degrees of Scorpio, 6 degrees back. And by the end of the day, it couldn't be much past 26 degrees of Scorpio because that's the opening, so to speak. So we know that Lori is a Sagittarius with the moon in Scorpio. But here's the thing. The moon in Scorpio is lined up with Jupiter, or at least within 5 or 6 degrees either way. We know that Jupiter is the planet of Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the archer aiming the arrow at the sky. Sagittarius is the, do you want it? Yeah. It's the let's go, but if we're gonna go, let's go far. Let's go to Kathmandu. Let's not go to Tacoma. Let's, it's the distance because Sagittarius is the long haul. It's Jupiter. It's expansive. It wants to reach out as far as it can. And again, because I know Lori a bit, I know that Lori has done more than her fair share of let's go to name a place, Where you been recently? Vietnam. Okay, so that's Lori. But here's the interesting thing is that Lori's a Sagittarius with Mercury and Venus and Saturn all near her sun. And the Saturn near her sun in Sagittarius is that a part of Lori that Saturn is going to hold back that expression of Saturn. I'm sorry, Saturn is going to hold back that expression of Sagittarius. And so whereas a lot of Sagittarians, I like to, are there any Sagittarians here? Sagittarian suns, moons, risings? I always say Sagittarians are the only signs that don't cast shadows. Why do I say that? It's because Sagittarius is Jupiterian. It's upbeat. It's positive. It's like, let's look at the positive. It's let's go. Let's go big. And so often they avoid the difficult, the hidden, the shadow. And yet in Lori's chart, because Saturn is close to the sun, there's a part of that that holds that energy in, that makes her more serious, more a being to be what's the right word? Huh? To be reckoned with. Thank you. No, that's exactly it. That whereas many Sagittarians, you can just say, oh, they're a Sag. So, but so that's important. The other thing is interesting is this grand square, the Jupiter 90 degrees to Chiron, 90 degrees to Mars, 90 degrees to Uranus, all the way around. Then we just take a look at what those 4 planets are. Jupiter is expand, make it bigger, more. Chiron, we already talked about it. It's the person, it's all of us, but it's the wounded healer that basically is also the student and the teacher. And Mars in Taurus is the person who is going to get there. Mars is physical and Taurus is grounded. I say with Taurus energy, and Bonnie is not here still, but with Taurus energy, it's almost like if you take care of the senses, everything else will take care of itself. So the Taurus energy with Mars and Taurus is striving to have the safety, the security, a home, money in the bank, good linens, good food, things that are physically comforting. And so Mars in Taurus is part of that, but it's 90 degrees to Uranus, which is the planet that says, just blow this whole thing up. And so the dance that Lori lives is that she's this expansive Sagittarian with Saturn holding it back, with some very basic stuff that attracts her to situations and people and events in life that are explosive and erratic and crazy making, that other people would say, I can't. But for Lori, that's what her life is. And it works because that's what energizes her. How'd we do? Yeah. And and the only other thing that I would say is that, remember the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that's happening on April 20th? Well, that's happening at 19 degrees of Taurus, meaning that Uranus and Jupiter are both right now. Jupiter is aligning on your Mars, which is more exuberance. It's pumping the energy up in some way, but also creating a bit of destabilization. And destabilization is not bad, because often it's when we become too Saturnian, too crystallized, that we die. We need to break up that stabilized energy. And I think that for the last months and maybe even year in your life, as Uranus in the sky has been going through that 17-degree point, back over it now again, as Jupiter's catching up with it, that you're moving through that phase. And I think that things over the next May, June, July will settle down quite a bit from where they've been. Does that make sense? I hope so. And that's it. And thank you, diehards, for staying here even longer. And for the record, I will be back here on the last Friday night of May. And I'm sorry, the first Friday night of May. But I will not be here the first Friday night of June. I will send out an announcement and it'll be on my YouTube. I will be here instead on the last Friday night of May. I think it's like May 2nd. Does anyone have a calendar? All right, May 3rd is the first Friday of the month, and then May 30th. May 31st is the last. And so those will be the two events, because I'll be teaching at Omega Institute the following week, and I'll be off to New York, so I won't be here then. So I'll see some of you next month. Thank you all for coming. I hope it was worthwhile, and be safe out there. It's crazy. And thank you for the happy birthday. And remember, the energy is crazy out there. And don't do anything stupid. Just, breathe with it, pay attention to what's going on. And I hope to see you all next month. Thank you. Thank you all. And thank you all online who have stuck it out this far. There's a part of me that thinks, don't you have something better to do with your life than just hang it? No, I'm kidding. But thank you all for supporting me, and I'll see you all again next month too. That's it.